Yeah, not a fan of these changes. Where was that a minute ago? Some more.
Right, exactly. It's over.
I can't move it over there now. It doesn't go. That's just another thing for me to complain about this morning, so I need to get off it. I'm in a really complaining mood. So we're gonna get over it. Okay, we're at the end of chapter 10. Beginning of chapter 11, we get out of one genealogy only to fall into another one for a moment in chapter 11. And then we'll be done with them for a while. Which is very Western of me to say, because Westerners don't like genealogies, and Genesis is full of them. Anyway, this is chapter 10, and I forgot to mention last week that there's a bracketing that goes on with this chapter. This is now, as the nations are going to be formed after what happens at Babel, the nations are going to spread out, disperse, scatter, as the author is going to say. And this chapter anticipates that. And there's this idea that, no, there's not an idea. The fact that the story of Babel is told after this story, when this story presumes Babel. But why did the author put those the other way around? And, there's all kinds of speculation about that, but you can see it right here. It's from these, the coastlands of all the nations were separated into their lands, everyone according to their language, according to their families, into their nations. That's Babel, after Babel. And then it'll close kind of the same way. These are the families of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, by their nations. Out of these nations were separated on the earth after the flood. So, it's a bracket here, after which is told Babel. But you can see the anticipation and the foreshadowing of Babel right here by this reference to it. Nimrod and the kingdom of Babel. And then some other things. So, it's coming. It's just this is how he did it. Whenever he did it. And then you have this other reference to Assyria with the capital in Nineveh, which are the two big empires along with Egypt that intersect with Israelite history. And I pulled out, let's see, where is it? I pulled out something here, or not. Oh, here it is. This is a not terribly sophisticated timeline I got right off the internet. But we're in Abraham is going to be like right here on this timeline, 2000 and something. And so we're, by the time of the Exodus, which is going to be here, the Babylonian Empire is on the scene. And so the Babylonians and the Assyrians will sort of trade back and forth in history for control. You have the Babylonian Empire, then the new Babylonian Empire, which they're calling the second one, and so forth. But it pays a little bit to know something about the history of that, because it intersects. You're going to read about it in books like 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. And so this is a timeline, and I just pulled this out. You've seen this before, but I highlighted in red what we care about. These references to Nineveh and Babylon. So here they are. Here's where they become, where basically Israelite history ends. Israelite history is going to end. Assyria is going to put an end to most of Israelite history, and then Babylon's going to finish the job. And this is going to happen 1,000 years after Noah, or 900 years. And so we're back here in chapter 11, when Abraham appears on the scene. That's right here, 2000 and something. I don't remember where I got this number. I did some quick math. And then you have the end. This right here is the scope of Genesis from chapter 11 to the end of the book, with Joseph and Jacob, with Jacob's family in Egypt. And then, oh, that's why I got this wrong. I think I'm off by 100 years right here. Am I off by 100 years right here? I think so. I'm off by 100 years right here. That should be 1800 and something. Anyway, I'll fix it later. This is the context for the book being written. So Moses writes it here somewhere, 1400 and something BC. when you have a Babylonian Empire, and obviously there's some kind of Assyrian Empire out there, because he references Nineveh. But were they known as, what were they known as at the time of Abraham? It's hard to tell. And what you'll see is these authors will use they'll use, of course, they'll use, like, for example, a good example of this is Laish, which is Bethel. Bethel's a better example. Bethel was named, Bethel is a Hebrew word. Beth El is Elohim, God. And so obviously at a much later time when this is written, then the city was renamed to Bethel. And so they used the renamed name, the new name, all the way through. Even though back at the time of the events, when Abraham, it wasn't called Bethel, it was called something else. I don't remember what it was called. But that's probably what that probably happens a lot. But at any rate, these, even though the Assyrian Empire is no big deal at this point in history, Moses, it's out there. And so, you see these references. Why mention these particular cities and kingdoms? Well, because they're relevant at the time. And so you see these, and also because Babel, of course, this anticipates what's about to happen in chapter 11.
Well, in chapter 12, I noticed when you had chapter 12 over here a couple weeks ago, it told, when you were talking to Abraham, God was talking to Abraham that you predicted, he told Abraham that your descendants are going to be in Egypt for over 400 years.
Yes.
So, he predicted that long before it actually happened
Yes.
and stuff, so.
Yep. Anyway, I just want to highlight, we don't care, but man, these cities that he's talking about in these kingdoms, they're a big deal in the Old Testament. They hover over, they overshadow large segments of Israelite history, and in some cases completely change it right here. And so when in Acts, I did Acts last week down the street at Covenant Life. You have these dispersed Jews that are going to flood into Jerusalem for Pentecost, and they're the ones that are going to take the gospel back out to their homes, the homelands, and plant churches like in Rome. Where did those Jews come from? That are out why are they out there? Why aren't they in Israel? Answer right here. The Babylonian exile. They were carted off into exile, and they stayed there. And they had families, and they engaged in business or whatever they did, and a lot of them did very well, like Paul's family, who eventually they got their Roman citizenship. That's why they're there. It's because of Babylon. And so that's why these places are important, and it just pays to note them. But you can see here, this is the entire book. This is the last 39 chapters of Exodus right here, of Genesis right here. This stretch right here tells you how important it is. Okay, anyway, let's see here. Go back. I don't think I have any more to say. I just wanted to sum up a little bit his use of the word nations here. Nations now become things. They weren't before. Now they become a thing. Cities, you go from individuals, family groups, tribal, to cities. Cain built a city, Nimrod built a city, the first one. Now you're going to move into nations. And that's going to be what happens as a result of Babel, the next story. So anticipating that, let's want to talk about that now? Anybody want to say anything about what I just said? Because I just made it all up off the top of my head.
This shows the fact that they predicted there was going to be more than one language, because Babel happened, there was just one language, so.
If you put this story before the last one, it seamlessly makes sense. It seamlessly flows. So for some reason, he put the story after instead of, you'll see that on a regular basis. They'll put things from our perspective out of order. Like, for example, that stuff in Hebrews chapter 6, concerning which we have much to say, since, you have become dull of hearing, For why now you should have been teachers, but you have need of someone to teach you. And then there's the tough passage in chapter 6. For it is impossible for those who have once been enlightened and have tasted the good word of God and so on and so forth, to having fallen away, to renew again to repentance. Well, that all interrupts the flow of the high priesthood of Melchizedek finally being realized in Jesus. And if you take all that out and put Hebrews chapter 7:1 right up against chapter 5, whatever that end, wherever that ends, it flows perfect. That's that's how they roll. That's they don't think this. They don't organize the way that we. Does not even organize the way we would. We don't even think of it as organizations. We think of it organization. We think of it as.
Dad said, your ways and my ways are
Yeah.
different. And your thoughts are different than my thoughts, so God's creator of his word, and he put it in there.
Yeah, he did. And you also, then on top of that, you also have a culture and a literary approach and a way of thinking that's light years away from where we are. We don't, you have to get in there, you have to get in their world. It takes work because you have to overcome your own biases and ways of looking at things, stubbornness and all that stuff, and put all that aside and just get in their minds and get in their world and think about it from their perspective. Babel. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. When did they use the same language and the same words? How about from here, right? This period right here. These 350 years after the flood, these people are spreading out, they're scattering, these genealogies, that's the idea here, right? You got these genealogies because it just shows these people scattering, and what's scattering with them, of course, is their tendency towards sin. And then it's going to again come to a head in this story. The whole earth was used the same language and the same words, and it came about as they journeyed east. East almost always means bad. It's almost always a precursor to bad. When you think of, for example, Adam was sent east out of the garden, then Abraham's going to come back west. So they all go east now. They journeyed east. And good things happen when Abraham's family starts journeying west. So they found a plain in the land of Shinar. That was where Nimrod was from. Babel. So we have this connection already. Settled there, and they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. Getting very detailed, uncompressed, expanded out. They said, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven, and let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. So the whole point of this is to not be scattered. We're going to, form some kind of organizational unit to prevent the thing that it seems as if was divinely ordained by God. So he had ordained apparently this scattering, and now they're going to act to inhibit that scattering. And then I'm thinking about this. I don't know. Do humans sin more when they're in organization with themselves? Is that what this means? Was the scattering some kind of constraint on sin? I don't know. It's a rhetorical question. Seems like it. It seems like it's not linear. It's not additive. If you take this person's sin and that person's sin and put them in contact with them, you don't get twice as much sin. Maybe you get sin squared. Now with 2, it's still 4, but maybe you get sin squared. I don't know. So but now you put 4 people. Do you get 4 times 2 is 8 units of sin, or do you get 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16 units of sin? I don't know, but maybe that's what's going on. When I look at human organization now, I'm still thinking out loud. Having never thought about this before, it does seem as if urban centers breed something in that regard. They all have a certain character. They generally have a certain character about them. They develop a culture. Now I'm really thinking out. They develop a culture of their own. And very rarely does that culture now in our day and age, or back in Roman times for that matter. When you think of the culture in Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, Thessalonica, Athens, do you get the sense that any of those cultures are God honoring? You know, yeah, urban centers don't come off too well in terms of their culture. They achieve a lot. I mean, the architecture and the engineering of the Acropolis in Greece is unbelievable. The Pantheon that the Romans built, incredible. The Temple of Artemis that we talked about, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. The Colossus at Rhodes, which we don't have. These are great achievements, but they're often achievements, and actually at least two of those cases, three of those cases, they're achievements in honor of their God. That's a thing that happened in the ancient world almost every time. Often their greatest engineering triumphs, like the Pantheon. The Pantheon was a Roman temple to all the gods. The Temple of Artemis was a temple to the goddess Artemis, Diana. Or it's the Colosseum, one of Rome's greatest achievements, and that's just a haunting Holocaustal. Made that word up. It's a form of Holocaust that comes through the centuries when you think about it. And so those are the kinds of things that just historically this kind of organizing of human society tend to produce. I don't know. I don't. So today, we don't do that now. We don't build temples to our gods. We consider ourselves modern. Modernity has overthrown that pre-modern, obsolete, superstitious way of thinking, and so we don't build temples to that. We don't have engineering feats dedicated to that. Now we just want the tallest building in the world, which they're talking about building in, I forget where now. I just was watching a documentary on this. But what we do is we have centers with a culture that develops. Those were not atheists. Those were people that were extremely religious. It's just that their religion was very ritualistic. But they were serious about it, so they would do this. They would show their seriousness about it by building extraordinary structures around it. But now, the culture isn't that. The culture is explicitly and avowedly anti-God, period. And that animates, in my view, I'm speaking just for myself, that animates modern urban culture. It's either he doesn't exist, he is to be dispensed with completely, entirely secular, but then now it's wrapped in this kind of pseudo-religion, this pseudo-religious cloak. That's I don't know what it is. It's this LGBT morality. I don't know, but that's where these urban centers have now gone. And every time they cluster up like that, that's what ends up happening, and then ends up taking over these places. And so they build, I don't know, they build institutions that are shrines to that instead of what they were shrines to before. So we haven't come very far. Is this worse than Hollywood? This Babel here, what they're doing here, is that worse than what goes on in what Hollywood? What is Hollywood a monument to? It's just woo. You don't even have to be particularly religious to be repulsed by it. But that's a monument to something that's at least as anti-God as this is, maybe more so, which just simply shows you the power of that covenant with Noah, that he forbears that he just, assuming that's what he's actually doing. I have my doubts about that at this point. Okay, that's enough talking off the top of my head. It's 9:46.
It actually kind of, what you've been talking about, verse 4, it says, let's build a city for ourselves and a tower which reaches the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name. Otherwise we were scattered. So basically, it's no different. They're making a name. These people did this to make a name for themselves. There was no praise to God.
There's a, speaking of that, European Union Babel. Yeah. Dangerous. I think this thing might be explicitly have as its model the Tower of Babel in the Bible. The European Union building in Strasbourg. I'll have to read up on this. Boy, if true, seems awfully risky. You really want to poke that bear? Use new Tower of Babel architecture here and there. Is this a religious? Let's see, pairing of the European Union's new facility in Strasbourg with the medieval painter Bruegel's Tower of Babel has occurred to not a few on the internet, not without very good reason. You can also almost assume that the designer intended to dare critics to draw the obvious comparison. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, man. That's if it was me, I'd make sure that I did not build something like that reflected that had any association with the Tower of Babel. Even if you believe, which they do, that the Tower of Babel was a myth. So what they're trying to capture here, if this is true, is the idea. Unity, right? I mean, globalism, the project, the post-World War II project has been unification. And we already know the track record of that sort of thing with the Tower of Babel. God doesn't like that sort of thing. He doesn't like humans organizing into a single unit. The nations were ordained by God to be there. And the project since World War II has been to do away with them. The transnationalism is the reigning order is the new world order. And that's why you have something like a European Union, where supposedly these borders are going to be obliterated. It's not going so well, it turns out. Just saying, there's still a Germany and a France and a Great Britain. Great Britain still uses the pound. Switzerland still uses the Swiss franc. Very hard to do away with. And man, it's just like daring God to come down again. Come, let us go down and check this out and see what we will do about it. And he may be doing something about it, because that whole post-World War II project, United Nations, you think about that statement, the United Nations. Well, first of all, there's nothing united about the nations. Really? You're going to put Israel and Iran in the same in two seats, one there and one there, in a single body, and call it United Nations? What am I missing here? What do I not understand that you understand? Right? You gotta be kidding me. I understand if you want to have a forum to settle disputes, but the United Nations, almost by definition, is unable to do so. People use it to their convenience, and when it's not convenient, they do their own thing. That's how it works with the United Nations. It's a useful tool. It's never more than that. In China, the United States, Security Council. You're going to put Russia, China, the United States on the same Security Council. We don't need that. We have telephones. Sorry, that's 1980s language. We have smartphones. You know, they can text each other. They don't need that, and they can contact each other in this second. They don't need that. They can Zoom call right now. Zelensky and Putin, Ukraine and Russia can Zoom call right now if they want to. They don't need this UN Security Council, and private anytime they want. Anyway, this craving for unity implies some sort of control mechanism. And it seems as if by definition, from the vantage point of God, it is anti his ordaining of things. The creator does not like his humans organizing themselves like this. And when he gets tired of it, he does something about it. I'm kind of wondering if he's doing so now around the world.
Advent of AI, it seems like that might be the next Tower of Babel.
AI. My own view is AI is going to be the most disappointing phenomenon of the 21st century, but that's just my opinion. We'll see. It's not actually going all that well. It's a useful tool for humans to use, but on its own, I don't think so. But we'll see. We have these arguments at work all the time. He probably does too. You know, big users out there in our bank say, "Why aren't you using AI?" And you know, I'd say because AI is stupid compared to me. I don't know.
And then there's the rest of us that go, how would you even use AI? How do you access AI?
Talk to him. He'll
Yeah,
have
that's
you.
what I mean, for the rest of, all the rest of us is like.
He'll have you going in 5 minutes. He'll have you writing songs in 5 minutes, which you can do, and papers. It's part of the problem that colleges are going through right now.
Oh, okay.
Students are using AI to do their work. Be careful what you wish for. All right, anyway, let's go. Pastor, I'm gonna get this back to the Bible. Maybe. Let us go down. Let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach to heaven. That's obviously a reference to God, reach to God, or something like that. From the author's standpoint, and so he means heaven. Do they mean heaven sky or heaven something greater than sky? I don't know. Because heaven, the word heaven there can mean either thing. It's the same thing in Greek in the New Testament. It can either mean the heavens were parted, meaning the skies were parted and the Spirit descended like a dove. The skies were parted, but it's got a double entendre. It's got two meanings, because not only were the skies parted, well, the word heaven also means the domain where God is, because that's, of course, where the Spirit is coming down from. And so it often has this double meaning or double entendre. Let's see. And let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we'll be scattered. That's what they're trying to prevent over the face of the whole earth. They understand God. Remember, what was God's mandate to Noah? It was the same as after in chapter 2. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Go, just scatter, right? Shoo, 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 scatter, go, 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 go. And then in chapter 9, it was be fruitful and multiply and rule the earth. But there's no sense of be fruitful, build for yourselves cities where you can clump up together in large groups. None of that. That's not what he means by be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. He means just go. And so now, obviously, that's what they're trying to prevent. So it's a direct countermanding of God's twice-fold ordination mandate upon the human race. This is the countermanding of be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So that gets God's undivided attention. He's watching and he sees that. It's very what's called anthropomorphic, using human reference points to understand how, to convey the meaning, to convey it from our perspective. Of course, God isn't coming down to see anything. He wouldn't, if he saw it, he wouldn't need to come down, right? I mean, that's the whole point. The Lord came, but there it is, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible to them. So think of the parallels between that. And I just thought of this. The sarcasm, I don't know what you want to call it, sarcasm? Remember this one? Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. You have this kind of statement with this. We debated whether this is sarcasm or not. I have my own views on that, but it's a similar kind of thing here. Nothing will be impossible. What's going on? My Explorer keeps opening up on its own. Nothing which they purpose will be impossible for them. So, well, that's not true. It's this, I don't know what it is. Is it God being sarcastic?
They could do anything.
Like, that's probably, let's go with that. Is he mimicking what their attitude, the ridiculousness of their own attitude? That they could actually accomplish what it is that they think they're going to accomplish? I don't know. But anyway, so now he's going to countermand. Let us make bricks, let us build for ourselves a city. He says, come, let us go down and confuse their language. We're going to countermand come, let us go down and countermand their countermanding. We will undo their undoing. My doing was be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Just go every direction, right? Omnidirectional, all the way around. To which they try to countermand. No, we're going to build for ourselves a city and prevent that from happening. To which he responds, no, you're not. I'm undoing your undoing of my doing. We're going to have it my way. And so in order to do that, then I'm going to confound your languages so you have no choice but to disperse, because you won't be able to talk to each other. Confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered. Look at that. There's the countermanding, right? Hey, let's countermand his scattering. He says, no. You're too big for your britches. So he does what he does, and they are scattered. I'm going to get what I want. What I want is scattering. So verse 8, the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, just exactly like he intended. And they stopped building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, confusion, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. I win, says God. Sometimes he allows humans to, he allows them they're sinful no matter what here. Sometimes he lets them do things, and sometimes he says, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And there's no stopping it. And so he acts. He says, no, this is the way it's going to be. That's it. And there's no negotiation, and he doesn't take suggestions. There's no consent given on the part of the humans. Free will. Find the free will here. Try as you might. I'll give you all day and all week. No. So that's the story of Babel. And this is the genesis of the nations.
God's viewpoint there as an old outline of some kind. I'm just looking at this, what you just described, God's viewpoint. In verse 5, God sees. In verse 6, he speaks. In verse 8, he acts. He looks, he sees, he acts. It's all under God's control. These guys are playing what any games they wanna, or do whatever they wanna. God sees, he knows, and he's in control. That's what we need to look at when we look at this and when we look at our world, as far as the big picture.
There's a for a world that's bent on unifying, I mean, just think about the organizations that have been put in place since World War II. These are all post-World War II. The International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, NATO, all of these there's NAFTA, the BRICS nations, Brazil, what's R? Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're just incessant organizing and unifying. And the more they, the more they do this, it just seems like the more confusion breaks out. So at this point, we live in a period of time where we're watching this entire unification project, almost like Babel, just break down in real time, slow motion. It's like watching a slow motion train wreck as they try to stem the entropy, the tendency towards disorder that they themselves have created. As they continue to try to do that, it just creates more disorder. Even with some of these nations that have been created, think about. I'll give you an example. Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was this artificial country that was created after World War I. If you know more about this than I do, say something, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. But when they went to when the post-World War II, post-Soviet era started, when the Soviet Union, which was an artificial organizing of an empire consisting of all kinds of disparate peoples, which then became the Russian Federation, which still has all kinds of troubles because these people do not play nicely with each other. They're just, it's tribal, it's ethnic. But Czechoslovakia, when Czechoslovakia broke down in 1990 and they had that war, the Bosnian thing, guess what it did? It degenerated back down into their 7 groups. You had the Czech Republic, and am I conflating things here? Bosnia and Herzegovina, you got all these different peoples that had always been there. And now with these artificial unifying forces that were trying to hold it together begin to burst apart, it just comes apart at the seams. And that happens frequently. Kuwait was another one of those. If you look at Iraq and Kuwait, it's obvious that Kuwait is an artificial entity that's carved out of Iraq. And that happened again with World War I. After World War I, there was another one of these. How are we going to prevent? It's the war to end all wars. How do we do that? We unify. We have the, what was the one before the United Nations?
League of Nations.
The League of Nations, which was Woodrow Wilson's idea, which sounds a little better than the United Nations. Okay, I get League. Let's all sit in a room and talk. Maybe we can settle some differences. Well, let's not pretend it's unified. There's unity. There's none of that nonsense, which the United States didn't even join the League of Nations. That was his idea. But the point was that this attempt to artificially define the world according to our schemes, never works. And Pakistan and India, there's all these examples of this. Gaza. Oh man. The harder you try, the worse it gets. And look at, I mean, that's incredible what's going on there, So, did Egypt and Israel need the United Nations to solve their problem? They signed a peace accord under Jimmy Carter in 1979, for which Anwar Sadat and the other guy, what was the Menachem Begin? And Jimmy Carter got the Nobel Peace Prize. There was no United Nations. They just, I got in a room. It's probably Jimmy Carter's greatest achievement, but only because these guys wanted to solve the problem, and nothing to do with any artificial imposition of unity. They just figured out a way to live next to each other and achieve some kind of détente, yes, in our own interests. Because once you have national interests, that can be a hindrance to conflict, because I got something to lose. But you don't need a United Nations. None of that stuff works. Has the United Nations ever really stopped a war? The single most ironic entity, artificial entity in the world is the United Nations peacekeeping force.
Mhm.
It just, if there was peace, you wouldn't need it. And if it's in there, it's because there's already peace. And if they want to go to war, they're going to ignore the peacekeepers. They just look like clowns with those stupid helmets that they have, you know. But anyway, from this day to now, when I look at the world, that's what I see. It's this war is still going on. These people won't learn the lesson. They still think that they can decide. They have the audacity and the arrogance and the hubris to think that they're going to decide how the world will be organized and not the creator. The creator said this way, and they're saying, no, we're going to undo that way. We're going to countermand his nations. We're going to have transnationalism, and we're going to, you know, imagine all the people living in harmony. John Lennon, Imagine. Another unbelievably ironic, which they still sing. It's like an ode, it's like an anthem to transnationalism. My observation of that is, yes, he did write that. The song is called Imagine, and he uses the word imagine 6 times in the song. And the only place you're going to get imagine there's no countries and no possessions too, and no religion, right? Nothing to die for. The only place you're going to get that is in your imagination, which he acknowledged in writing the song when he said, imagine it. That's the only place you're ever going to see it. Why? The creator doesn't do that. He's not going to let that happen. Didn't let it happen here. He's not letting it happen now.
They
This-
sang that at Carter Stream though.
Did they? Sure. Okay. They can all feel good about themselves and virtuous, you know. But they're at it again. This whole post-World War II project has been a complete failure. And I won't be surprised if 20 years from now, none of these organizations have any, either they don't exist or they just are appendages on a bygone era. That's my rant on the very idea of humans deciding to countermand their creator and organize the world the way that they choose.
The only way I can go to bed in peace in the world that I live in is to recognize that this is my Father's world.
Yes.
And all this you're talking about is man's idea that started right here, when you're talking about way back in biblical history. They're trying to do it their own way, and it never will work.
Yeah, I'm very serious that you can, you cannot escape. You can think of it generically as you cannot escape God, but your creator claims you. Jesus claims his people for himself. God has called a people to himself through Jesus, but he claims everyone. In a far larger sense, he claims everyone and every molecule in this universe as his own by virtue of the fact that he is the creator. And by being creator, he is the king. He is the king of it over his praise to the Lord. How does that go? Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. That's it. And he means not just Christians. Everybody will praise the King of creation. Okay, now I really am done with my rant. That's babble. What else have I got to say about this? Maybe nothing. So in verse 2, they settled right there, went as far as the land of Shinar, and they settled. And by the end of the section, he had scattered them. No settling. You're going to keep moving.
We give no choice, they change their language, so.
Exactly right.
They couldn't, talk to each other, only certain people could talk to each other, so.
Yeah, every time you see a translator, you know, they used to have, there it goes again. Why is it doing it? Is the Chinese on my computer opening, screwing around with my, it's that AI, man. That's what it is. Somebody's using AI to control my computer. Now I had a thought a minute ago, now I've lost it.
Kind of a gathering of language.
Oh, yeah, we used to have these translators when I worked at the Pentagon. We would have these, you'd have, this high-level functionary from this country and this other high-level functionary from our country, maybe usually it was, I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, so I was in the intelligence world. But you'd have, the director of intelligence of Germany. And then you'd have the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, our organization, who's a 3-star general. And German doesn't speak English. And American doesn't speak German. So they get this guy in between that they rent from the State Department, and his job is real time. When these guys are talking, they're talking to each other, and he's sitting right there, and he's translating both ways between the two. And so he manages somehow to keep these two narratives going on in his head as they talk, and he just goes back and forth with these guys. It's remarkable to watch. They're so good at this. But when I think back on that, I think there's the remnant, there's the fallout, the residue of this confusing of the languages right there. You have to have this guy, however many thousand years later, between these two translating. That's God's doing, and he's not going to let it change. Isn't it amazing that we're in the 21st century, 2024, and there is not a universal language? There's always a language of commerce. It was French during the time that the French were the biggest empire. Then it was Spanish. Then when it was the British Empire was the empire. Usually it's associated with navies. These are naval powers. When the English became the language of commerce, and English remains the language of commerce. But not all these people have it. It's just if you want to do business and you want to trade oil for money and so forth, you use a common currency. We all agree that we're going to use the dollar, but they can't even get a common currency for the whole. They're trying. It's called the SPD. That's what they want, but they can't get a common language and they can't get a common currency. In 2024, it seems impossible. I don't think he's going to let it change. Take the hint. Let's see. So the city, which they intended to be the vehicle to unite people, is the vehicle that's used to disperse the people. In spite of the fact that the builders determined to build a tower to reach to the heavens, God still has to come down to it, almost mocking its, what was it? 102 feet high? You're going to reach the heavens? What'd you get? 102 feet? 108 feet? How high did you get that thing? How far did God have to travel to come down to your tower that was supposed to reach to the throne of God, or whatever he means by that? So we're going to stop there. I beat this to death. We still live in the aftermath of the Tower of Babel and the nations. Because this happened, because there's the nations, that's why he had to, that's Jesus. There it is again. There's those Chinese. Look what they're doing. Popping it up and closing it. He had to redeem the nations. And the way he did that was, I don't know what's going on. Isn't that weird? I'll talk to you about that afterwards. The way he was going to do that is he's going to open up the covenant with Abraham and bring the nations in through faith in Jesus. He's the unifier. There is one united people of God. That's the only place in the history of the human race where you will see the obliteration of any sort of national sense. But even there, they're still among the nations. But they are now united in the people of God. They're united on an equal footing before the Creator, Jesus Christ himself. That's where you see the unity. Outside of him, there is no unity. So stop talking about it. Just, Just not talking about it, because it's laughable. Let's go ahead and stop. That's just me. I feel like I was ranting this whole time. Mostly because of what's going on in the world today, and I see so many parallels with it. We can talk about that sometimes. Incredible. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hang up. Naomi and Nate and Gabe, I hope I didn't waste your time.
It was very interesting. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. I'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.